All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I'm your host, Cardon with Cody, and today, Andrew Yang is suggesting a way he's going after fake news. Andrew Yang is taking on the fake news media, and he's actually got some interesting ideas. I am really excited to dive in to his suggestions in his 2020 presidential platform of American Journalism Fellows. Now, a lot of you might just have some basic visceral reaction about, yeah, man, Fox News sucks, or yeah, man, MSNBC's just leftist propaganda. Go after him, Andrew Yang. But this runs deep in its importance. When the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Federalist Papers, and all of those documents that birthed the greatest, most stable country in the world, in history, they knew you needed an armed citizenry, a freedom of speech, assembly, religion, and the press, as well as a separation of powers in order to safely and effectively transfer power from president to president. And in that separation of powers, they birthed three branches of government, but they wrote about a fourth, just like there was a fifth Beatle. You know, all those Beatle fans talk about the fifth Beatle that never got credit.
You mean the first Paul that died, that one?
Yeah, I don't know enough about the Beatles to make an absolutely...
Paul McCartney never died. It's the real Paul McCartney.
Oh, yeah. See, that just shows how little I know about the Beatles. But just like there was that fifth Beatle that everybody talks about, there was a fourth branch of government that all of the Founding Fathers referenced as possibly the most important branch of government, but an unofficial branch of government, and that is the media, or what they called back then the press. And the reason why they stressed so much the importance of the freedom of the press was because they knew the press is what had to hold all three branches of this government to account. It's what had to hold them accountable, okay? Now, unfortunately, all of that's gone by the wayside. The faith in the press that the Founding Fathers had was far greater than the faith in the press that America has. In fact, right now, we can go to this Statista graphic, which is pretty awesome, that shows the approval rating, or at least the trust that the average American has in the news media. And as you can see, the numbers are abysmal, okay? Not only has the general average approval rating of the average America gone down from nearly 60% to as low as almost 40%, okay? With Democrats, it has spiked upwards, where 76% of them like the news media, which should actually worry you, because if 3 out of 4 people in the room really like what's getting said, it's probably not true, okay? And only 21% of Republicans liking the news media, yeah, because the news media has shifted wildly leftist. That's part of the reason why it's failing. Some of it is a natural result of the economy, getting rid of newspapers that have international news divisions and getting rid of actually papers at all and having everything online and digital, no more classifieds like we had in the 80s and 90s. Craigslist took care of all of that. So a lot of this is a natural decline, but a lot of it is actually a political decline. 7 out of 8 American journalists self-identify as liberal and or register as Democrats. So if you don't think there's a wild political bias in what you are getting fed as news, then you're crazy.
Well, I just want to say, I don't think politicians should be barred. I don't think journalists should be barred from voting or holding beliefs of their own. I just do think there seems to be a little bit of too much bleed over. Both sides, all ideologies, too much bleed over from your own ideology. I remember, quick aside, my own kind of naivete back in 2016, I believe 5 major publications, like New York Times, I don't have all of them off the top of my head, but they all ran an op-ed the same day saying that journalists needed to come together to defeat Trump. I remember reading that and just thinking all right, if he's so bad, just tell me why he's bad and we'll vote. Just tell us the truth and let us make decisions. It's kind of like it's kind of that nanny state mentality of, no, we're going to tell you what's right. And if we can't convince you, we're going to kind of fudge things. So I think that's where the issue comes in. There's nothing wrong with being a registered Democrat who's a journalist. That's fine. Everyone has their own beliefs.
Nobody cares.
I think when it comes to maybe donating money, because I mean, I forgot who said it originally, but someone said what's way more impactful than donating money to Hillary's campaign is talking Hillary up all day on your news network. That's worth millions of dollars,
Earned media attention, or unearned media attention as it's called. So the only reason why I find this so sad but hilarious at the same time is, let's go to the great news #MAGA tweet that President Donald Trump just put up, where he's stoked out of his mind that he's got a 55% overall average rating right now. You know what I'm saying? With a 58% excitement and rating of approval on the economy. It's bad, and a president's approval rating is bad when 55% gets you excited. And you also know that a Congress's approval rating is really bad when 30 some odd percent gets you excited. And you know that the fourth branch of government's situation and law in life is horrible when you're hanging down in, I don't know, sometimes the teens and the low 20s of approval ratings and trust in your...
Well, I would say this is one thing I always joke with people, similar to people always like when people are hating on Trump, I'm with them halfway there. Yeah, what's the president ever done for me? Why should I care about the president? He should be like, we should be holding his feet to the fire every day. It's when it gets into, well, it's because he's a this or he's a that. It's like, well, no, he's the president. He's the president. He should fear the public because we can vote him out or worse. And no one should ever be 100% happy with the president. It's just, unless we're living in an actual utopia, he's the president. What have you done for me lately? What are you going to do for me? And what are you doing that I think is wrong? That should be the discussion always. I think where it gets lost too much in, he's an X, he's a Y, he's a this. That's where it gets a little bit hysterical and not helpful. But yeah, the president should be, I think 50% approval rating is kind of crazy for a president, or above that. It should be 50%. There should be people who don't like and people who do in the middle. I think 80% approval rating on a president is crazy to me, and I always like pointing out highest approval rating for any president ever, I want to say, is George Bush just after 9/11. So that's also how much approval ratings
and he was
actually
at 88.1%, if I remember correctly. But do you know who the second highest approval rating was?
Do not.
Oh my gosh, we have got to pull this up. I'll look for it in my history.
I'll get it. Go ahead, man.
The presidential approval numbers, according to not Quinnipiac or Pew Research, but the third biggest one, Gallup poll, showed his father. His father enjoyed a high 80s presidential approval rating during the last, I believe it was last quarter of his presidency. In fact, if you go back and you look, I think 3 out of the past 5.
I got it right here. Yeah. Looks like in 1991, George H.W. Bush at 89% approval rating.
89? I mean, that's incredible.
Well, the funny thing is, they also have the two of the lowest approval ratings in the last 40, 50 years or so.
Yeah, Bush, those first 6 months was horrible.
Well, George Bush had approval rating at 25 in 2008, basically for the whole year. And then in 92, H.W. Bush down to 29. I mean, Truman at 22 and Nixon at 24 are the only ones lower than them.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So anyway, back to Andrew Yang and how he plans to combat this abysmal problem where nobody trusts the media, not one of them, because they
76% Democrats do. So someone does.
Okay, they trust something about the media. But by and large, the average American has lost faith in the fourth branch of government, and that does not help anybody. Andrew Yang proposes the following in order to combat this mistrust in the media. I read from Andrew Yang's Yang2020.com. He proposes American Journalism Fellows. Interesting. Trust in media is at a record low as local news organizations dwindle away due to diminished ad revenues and circulation, just as I talked about with Craigslist and classifieds and paper and so on and so forth. Talks about funding. He says it's imperative that we stop this trend of the mistrust in media. We must treat journalism as the important safeguard to democracy that it is, and free up a critical body of reporters from market pressures and incentives. What's interesting is I've often thought that Ronald Reagan getting rid of the fairness doctrine was wildly detrimental to news, and it's what created profitable news. See, it used to be with the fairness doctrine. I'm oversimplifying this. But all the way up until the 80s, there was a rule that if corporations wanted to broadcast on FCC channels, okay, like ABC, CBS, NBC, so on and so forth, you could pull a profit from your ad revenues, but you had to make sure that you put a certain percentage of the profit, let's just say it's 10%, into services of public good. Okay. Well, most of these channels interpreted public good as news, and they offered news broadcasts for free. In fact, at one point, CBS was bragging against NBC, was bragging against ABC about who lost more money on their news coverage, meaning that their news coverage by losing more money was actually better for the public good. So when Ronald Reagan got rid of that and allowed news corporations to actually become profitable, they started becoming a little bit more sensational, leading to this big grift and this big, not grift, rift between like MSNBC over here and Fox News in the 90s. Interestingly enough, data suggests now that Fox News has actually come to the center and is one of the more reliable, which is kind of funny for somebody who grew up with me. My generation. But anyway, Andrew Yang suggests initiating American Journalism Fellows, through which reporters from each state nominated by a body of industry professionals and selected by a nonpartisan commission will be given a 4-year grant of $400,000, which is $100,000 income per year. Okay, that's only $11,000 less than a state senator makes, and stationed at a local news organization with the condition that they report on issues relevant to the district during the period of their fellowship. This is kind of like the Knights Templar, who only reported to the Pope and invented our modern system of banking and modern systems of warfare.
Okay,
all right?
but one thing I see here, I kind of...
Did you bristle on?
I pause that. I think one thing...
It gives you pause?
I think one thing in this country we're seeing a lot kind of talking about this. I think there's a growing rift between the media class and the average person.
Yes.
There's definitely a lot of elitism. I saw a tweet recently where a reporter said that someone turned him down for a date, and they're joking that I'm going to pull up their court records and, you know what I mean, like kind of, you know, do what I could do. So I think there's this growing rift between the reporters and the citizens. And I think creating this council of the elite reporters who get their government grant, I could definitely see it increasing that rift because, I mean, the American public can distrust the press even if the press is 100% fair and truthful if they just don't like the way they act. You know what I mean? So I could see also another thing here. He's proposing to break it up the same way we bring up Congress people, which would mean that California would have 55 and Wyoming would have 3 of these people. So there'd be 55 people making $100,000 a year from the U.S. government to report news in the state of California alone. And I think right now we talk about the kind of media class, but that would create a literal media class. They are the truth arbiters, and that, you know, some stuff can happen there. That's not necessarily intended, but could be negative.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. However, right now I think that's pretty much where we're living in. And the data suggests, at least I think, this could move us a little bit more to the center. And the reason why I think this is because Twitter, despite all of its flaws, has done one very big service to the American public in regards to shedding light on how the media behaves. And they were able to track all of the subscriptions that all of the journalists that subscribe and are registered on Twitter, who they subscribe to. Or who they follow. Sorry, you're right. Who they follow. And on Twitter, they found that almost monolithically, left-leaning reporters and journalists almost uniquely and only subscribed to other left-leaning journalists and reporters, while the conservative or more right-wing or right-leaning journalists generally subscribe to both. So I would see this as a move that would force a lot of left-leaning journalists out of their comfort zone by no longer forcing them to be incentivized by sensationalist clickbait, which is all any of these modern news organizations are anyway. Just look at BuzzFeed, look at Gawker, look at all of these other...
But one thing I have a question on here, though, is would the majority party decide who these fellows are?
Well, this is also, this is where I want to dive in. I want to say, what is a nonpartisan commission? Because when he says... nominated by a body of industry professionals and selected by a nonpartisan commission. Come on. We've all seen how the Oscars have become completely political. I mean, one year everybody's clamoring about how there's not enough black people represented in the Oscars or in this or in that. And instead of actually casting actors and making a natural increase in the amount of African-American talent in Hollywood, they overcorrect and widely start nominating anything written by an African-American for awards so that the next year it's the highest amount of awards ever given to African-Americans, which unfortunately only cheapens the struggle and makes it look like it was a fake handout. So I'm hoping that if you could prove to me, Andrew Yang, that this would truly be a nonpartisan commission, I would be all for this. But the question is, how do you prove that?
Well, I mean, also, maybe when he's in office for 4 to 8 years, it would be. And then 15 years down the line, it'd become an absolute mess. And
yeah, because like honestly, the Academy is supposed to be a nonpartisan commission, but it acts wildly as political group.
Don't get me started on the Academy. I don't think it's anything to do with like even like necessarily like modern social politics. The Academy is almost always looked for movies. One, you got to play the game. You got to do what you got to do to get. I mean, not the best movie. I can list you 15 movies. You say that didn't win. No. It's because they're typically looking for the more socially relevant or socially important film. That's kind of the way they lean as far as when they nominate. It's not necessarily the best achievement in film. And then also at the same time, I like Lord of the Rings. I think Lord of the Rings still has the record for most Academy Awards won by a film, the Return of the King. So like, they don't get me started in the Academy, basically.
Yeah, I get that. However, just like a blue check next to somebody's Twitter profile gives them more credibility. Okay, and just like if we go to a doctor and it says DDS or MDS behind it, it gives them more credibility. I think it would be interesting. To try this out. Once again, this fits in that category of Andrew Yang ideas that I would be willing to try.
And again, this is why I don't love it, but I can see the implication of his automatically sunsetting of laws applying to this. Because if we implement it and it works for 15 years and stops working, I would hate to see it go 50 years plus not working.
Yes,
I mean?
exactly.
Just get rid of it.
Just like Ronald Reagan said, the closest thing to eternal life that we have found is a government bureaucracy. And I wouldn't want this to be just another government bureaucracy. But if we really truly could develop a nonpartisan commission of men and women who were called to literally be above the fray, just like the Supreme Court has lifetime not commissions,
also
but
hyper partisan and very, very much a partisan issues in the Supreme Court. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. So anyway, in a nutshell, this falls into the some of Andrew Yang's ideas totally dead on arrival and stupid. Some of his ideas totally awesome, and I want him stat tomorrow. The majority of his ideas fall into this really kind of cool think tank category where I'd be willing to try it out, but I see how it could potentially be abused. If it could be done in a transparent way, I'm all for it. Please like, subscribe, share these videos. Let us know what you think and tell us what videos you want to make. We are all about conversing about the different ideas that many of our subscribers have actually suggested we talk about. So yeah, tell us what you're thinking below and we'll make a video for you. This is Problem Solver Politics.